This video contains spoilers for Vinland Saga Season 2, but what else did you expect clicking on this video? Also, I started a Patreon exclusive server where I plan on having watch parties, so feel free to join if you want to. And thank you for all the support. Oh yeah, links to that and the rest of my socials down in the description below. My favorite thing about reading stories and really recommending them has always been finding characters that really make me think about my current state in life and offer some sort of message that I can really learn from. Don't get me wrong, I also like just enjoying stories for what it is, but I find those to be the stories that connect with me the most. Three characters that often get put into this category and side by side are Guts, Musashi, and Thorfinn, the literally me characters, and understandably so. But although there are common things such as self-improvement, humanity, and dealing with revenge, the way each of these characters are presented within their story is very different in the paths that they take. Every story has turning points, moments where it really defines its main character and does something special. The development of a character is something that happens throughout the entire story, but you get the point. And so, with Season 2 of Vinland Saga currently ongoing, I thought now would be a great time to talk about one of the best arcs in manga in my opinion, but for a very different reason than we tend to praise the other arcs. But before we can get into that, we have to sort of go over the events that led to this point. Thorfinn at the beginning of the story is presented to us in a very straightforward way. His personality and relationships with the characters around him are made incredibly clear. Thorfinn is established as angry, asocial, persistent, someone who uses violence as their first response, and someone who has no issue taking human life if they serve as an obstacle to his revenge-filled objective, which is to kill the man responsible for his father's death, Askeladd. The two most important people in Thorfinn's life at the beginning of the story are Askeladd, the object of his revenge, and his father Thors, the man who is giving Thorfinn the answer to his revenge from the very start. A conflict lies deep within Thorfinn, the past of his teachings of his father and his desire to kill Askeladd, but that inner conflict is buried beneath Thorfinn's hatred, and he would sadly forget the very thing his father told him in pursuit of avenging him. You have no enemies. No one has any enemies. There is no one that you should hurt. Thorfinn's entire life is dedicated to this one-track-minded vengeance, the reason he fights, slaughters others without second doubt. Askeladd's death is all that Thorfinn wants, but the question he fails to ask himself as most tend to when pursuing a goal so intensely: what will he do once his revenge is satiated? What purpose will his life have once Askeladd is dead? Askeladd himself even asked Thorfinn the question, a question the hate-filled boy has no answer to. Reality, being cruel, doesn't give Thorfinn the answer so easily. And in an even crueler twist of fate, he is denied his revenge when Askeladd sacrifices his life to Canute. So that leads us to the next sector in Thorfinn's story, which is the aftermath of pursuing revenge and the lingering effects that come with it. I think it's really interesting to look back at the first arc and see the way different characters sort of go about violence and sort of understand the world that they live in, specifically through the eyes of Askeladd and Canute, understanding that there are certain ways you have to go about things in order to advance in the world. And more than just the conflict Askeladd has with Thorfinn due to what he did to his father, I think the way that Askeladd is set up as a character greatly contrasts Thorfinn, and even to the bitter end, we can see that Askeladd was always a step ahead, while Thorfinn in the moment seems to be very short-sighted. What really seemed to get him out of bed every day, and the motivation behind all of his actions, was to get an opportunity to duel Askeladd and get his vengeance. But, like I said, sadly that was denied, and then we move on to the next arc in the story. After a life of being a slave, literally into his revenge, now Thorfinn finds himself a slave once again, but to a man who owns a large amount of land, and now to his past. Interestingly enough, earlier in the video I mentioned how Guts, Thorfinn, and Musashi are different, but interestingly enough, and a bit of a coincidence, Musashi and Thorfinn seem to both have the strongest moment of character introspection once they are both put on a farm. I think the reason for this is now the story isn't focused on so many different external conflicts, as in the first arc of Vinland Saga and in the other arcs of Vagabond, we have moments to really focus on other characters and what they're doing. And although there are external conflicts that do exist within the respective stories, the biggest moments of tension and focus for the character is what happens within. A moment of relative peace where the character can be solitary for long stretches of time with just their thoughts, while not having to worry about being murdered by another swordsman, or in Thorfinn's case, another Viking. Well, sort of. An interesting aspect to Thorfinn that I believe is super important to pay attention to are his eyes. Once again, something that can be seen giving great importance to characters like Guts, Musashi, and many others are the attention to the eyes. The eye is the window of the soul. At the start of the story, his eyes are drawn with intense emotion, a dormant hate that turns into unforgiving rage, images that we'll see sometimes later on as the story continues, but in much rare circumstances. But at the start of the Farmland arc, we see Thorfinn through the eyes of a character who would be the second most important character in the series, Einar, or at least for this arc. Once we get a look at Thorfinn now through his eyes, there is one word to describe his expression: despair. Although emptiness could also be felt through his gaze, in this stage in his life he has no family, no friends, and no purpose. At the beginning of the farmland arc in chapter 55, on the hillside drear, the fir tree dies, all bootless its needles and bark. It is like a man whom no one loves. Why should his life be long? Thorfinn now has the answer to Askeladd's question. What will he have after he is dead? Nothing. Nothing but his regrets and the guilt of the lives he has taken, shown with the imagery of Thorfinn having corpses cling onto him and drag him down into hell, where all the Vikings who indulge in violence end up in contrast to the corpses Canute had to climb in order to achieve his goal. And in a far, far away land, a white hawk has his own corpses to climb. This was the bloodthirsty trap his father Thor's was trying to prevent him from going down. The moment he saw Thorfinn grab the blades in his childhood, he knew nothing good could come from a life of blood, death, and nothing else. It's an endless torrent of misery that would pull in so many more than Thorfinn would realize in the moment. And so now, with no direction and with no ambition, all that fills his empty soul are the actions of the past. A slave on a farm, he now desires to be free of his past, the error of his relentless hatred and the lives he took because of it. And so now the words of his wise father are coming back to him in his dreams and memories, offering some form of escape. Throughout the arc, I think we get a really powerful showcase of different stages in the way people deal with closure and moving on from a past lifestyle. Throughout the arc, we get to see Thorfinn start with no longer really having the desire to live, to seeking an answer to be free from his past, and then a way to live his life from now on. It's a real moment of self-reflection we get through the entirety of the farmland arc, and it's put to the test when him and Einar get poor treatment from others because of their low status as slaves. And so this time, instead of violence being his immediate response, we see Thorfinn grow and show maturity, climbing out of the blood-soaked cycle he was trapped in, refusing to use violence even on those who try to use it against him, conversation and de-escalating situations to the best of his ability, although there are still struggles at times, and there will be struggles that will really push him to his breaking point as the story continues onwards. It reminds me the struggle other characters have at times when it comes to not killing. Batman would be my example. Look, just bear with me for a moment. But in Under the Red Hood, I don't know if y'all have seen the movie, the defining scene is where Jason Todd, or Red Hood, is pressing Batman about what he calls an outdated moral code, and that he isn't asking for petty criminals to be murdered, but just the Joker. And Batman responds with a quote that I think really defines his character, saying, "No, God Almighty, no, it'd be too damned easy. All I ever wanted to do was kill him," referring to the Joker. "But if I do that, if I allow myself to go down into that place, I'll never come back." The point I'm trying to convey with that example is the difficulty of changing a lifestyle and all the challenges that can bring, especially if it's one of violence. It's easy to lash out, to release one's anger, and in Thorfinn's case, kill, especially when that's all you've done for the majority of your life. It's the easy solution to his problems, one that works in the moment, but in the end does nothing but destroy his soul and the lives of innocents in the process. I mean, look back to the beginning of the story. Thors could have taken the easy route and killed Askeladd, but instead he wanted to avoid the bloodshed, which cost him his life. The sacrifice to maintain peace is a harsh one, and not many are willing to go that far. And so in Farmland and throughout the story, it becomes a difficult road for Thorfinn, and he is far from perfect. But in the end, he is a man who is trying to become better, stronger, because true strength does not come from a person who uses their own power recklessly, but a person who uses their strength to stand by their convictions and protect the ones dear to them. Thorfinn once used violence as his first response, and throughout the Farmland arc we see him change into a man who uses it as his last resort, seeing a character on a farm change entirely. Someone who could be more than the hatred that has defined them before, and instead live a life as one should, with no enemies. Why? Because in the end, no one is your enemy.